Hey folks, welcome back to KEI Fabrication. This week we're back up at Harmony Acres Farms where we did the startup of the Ford Fiesta. We have another special startup for you. Check it out, you're going to enjoy it. We'll see what happens. Hey, I'm getting a little flash.
All right.
That should go from there to there. Let's see what happens. So I just threw the jump box on it on the battery. Ooh, I think I heard a fuel pump. Let's see. Well, good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Mike.
So we wanted to get a little bit of history on this car. Now, we'll go a little bit ahead before we go way back. Okay. So you purchased this property, what, a year and a couple months ago?
In October, yep.
Okay, of 2021?
Yeah.
Okay. And 20, anyway, so
20, yeah.
October of 2020. Okay, yeah, so a year and a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. And this car was, you bought this whole property basically in as-is condition and all of its contents. And those of you who watched my channel before, Steve and I did the startup on the Ford Fiesta, which is sitting right next to us here, all nice and cozy. That was part of the contents of the property when he bought it. This was here as well, except you couldn't you could not really see it because it was buried in stuff. So that's how it got here, and Steve has found the parts in outbuildings all over the place and decided that there was enough here to be a complete package that it was actually worth trying to put it together. Now this motor has not run in, as far as we know, about 10 years, you said?
Yeah, about 10 years.
And the tires were rotted flat on the ground. Steve has went and since replaced the tires with just basically some body shop tires. And he thought it was worth going the extra mile on this car and putting the time into it to restore it. However, he was doing that based on the history he had with the engine and that it was a good running drivetrain. So, but he still doesn't really know, and that's what we're about to find out, hopefully, today.
Right.
So, that's kind of the present last year and a half or so of this, and in that time period, you managed to fix the house, clean out the barns, empty the garage out so you could actually get near this thing, and then unbury it, and then in your spare time, actually went ahead and reassembled all of the body parts that you could find, and started doing the body work and got it in primer and a lot of other stuff. You completely redid the braking system, right?
Yes. Yep.
So all four wheels, brakes have been done. So again, all in anticipation that, based on the information that you received, that the motor was in good shape and the transmission, so on and so forth.
Right. The fellow that owned this vehicle owned an auto body shop that I worked in back in 1976 through 1978. And this Ranchero was his pride and joy. When he bought it, it was maroon. And the VIN code tells me that it was a 6-cylinder when the car was built in 71, but I don't honestly know if it had a 6 or an 8 in it, you know, when he restored it back in 1977. He didn't like the maroon color. It was originally a mint green color.
We'll show you that because Steve uncovered some of the original body panels. We can show you the beautiful mint green
The
that
mint
it
green.
was.
I think I've looked it up on a couple of different sites, and one of them called it anti-establish mint green. So, you know, it was the 70s, and, you know, but the guy that owned this car, he loved this car. He restored it, painted it blue metallic. I'm not even sure which paint code, if it was a 71 or something that he just liked.
And we have pictures of that from 1977 when the car was fully restored.
Yeah. Well, he got into a pretty rough accident with it. Took out a bunch of stone wall, and I think it was a utility pole. It ended up about halfway into the hood of this car.
Which we'll show you pictures of that as well.
It was, I mean, it was so bad, if I remember correctly, it actually bent the rear end. It pushed the drivetrain back so hard in it. And so I remember in the auto body shop, he had gone down to one of the local junkyards and picked up a Fairlane. It was either a 70 or a 71. And he cut the whole nose off of that thing and cut the nose off of this Ranchero. And I remember him putting the two together.
And this was in 77?
77 or 78, yeah.
Right. So when he cut the thing in half, he literally cut it here at the A-post.
Yes.
And somewhere in the,
Yep,
where the unibody goes under the floor.
Yes, yep.
And
The
we have
rails
we have
go back.
pictures of that with the two pieces separate
Yeah.
and then going back together.
I was pretty amazed that something like that could be done, you know, especially back then. I was 17 or 18 years old. And the body shop ended up closing down in 78. And after that, you know, I knew that he had been working on that. I don't think he had even started with anything on the drivetrain at that point. And I kind of lost touch with him as far as, you know, what happened with the Ranchero after that. Through a crazy bunch of events, sadly he passed away a few years ago. He and my dad were really good friends. Actually ended up, they were actually brother-in-laws. But he had gathered parts for this, we found, like Mike had said. There are 4 barns on this property. We found parts for this thing in all 4 barns. He had, the GT hood was on it, which it didn't have originally. It was something that he added. And that was off of a Torino that he found somewhere, because I could see where the Torino emblem was. The fender, this fender matched the hood. The fender on the other side, I think, was like a chrome yellow, almost like a school bus yellow with some fancy pinstriping, and it still had its part of the 71 laser stripe on it, which I'd like to restore this car and put a laser stripe on it if I can ever come up with a color in my head that I want to paint it. But the family that lived here, I ended up purchasing this farm. The family that lived here was a huge family. They had big family reunions, and they would use this garage as part of the family reunion. And Butch, the guy that owned this car, he would start this up once a year for the family reunion, pull it out into the field so they could use this. I've never heard it run. He worked at a Ford dealership. He was an auto body shop manager. He was a jack of all trades when it came to mechanics and machinery. So I have faith that that it is going to be a good running rig, maybe with a little extra cam in it. His daughter had said that she loved the throaty sound that it made when it ran, and throaty sound it must have, because when I crawled under this thing, it's never had an exhaust on it. It's got the manifolds and then the header pipes that come down, and they're cut off right at the firewall. So it had to have been loud.
So one of the things that we realized by looking at the pictures and the damage from the crash is that the engine in this had to have come from somewhere else because the way that the utility pole hit the front was right in the center, and it actually hit the crankshaft. And there's enough evidence to support the story of the rear end being bent and pushed backwards, and the only way that could have happened is if the crankshaft went into the transmission and the transmission bowed out on the drive shaft, and then the drive shaft bent the rear end housing.
That thing was hit almost perfectly dead center.
Right, and when you look at the pictures, you'll notice that where the car was cut, it actually bent way up. So the engine, we think, had to have been replaced because there's no way that it could have been any good. The crank was bent. And the other thing you found in the corner of the barn was basically a Ford Performance camshaft,
Yes,
and that had a date on it of
1982.
right. So we think that the original cam that was in this engine is in the tube that he found, and that the high performance camshaft is in the car now. So it'll be interesting if the thing fires and it runs decent enough to see if it has a noticeable, potato
Yeah.
idle. So
Plus, yeah, he's put a 4-barrel Holly on it. I guess that MSD.
it has a MSD box, 6AL ignition. So whether those parts came in the Torino that was a parts car, or he just thought that it could have had it on it before the crash, for all we know. But
Maybe, yeah. I don't remember that stuff. I was never that interested in, in what was under the hood as much as, I really liked this 71 era muscle car look on these. And, I know he did. And it was just a 500 with a plain Jane hood on it, which, they're really sharp looking cars, but I think the GT hood brings it up a notch. And
right, it has the GT wheels that don't belong on the car.
they're actually a 69.
Right. We have a picture of it with the center caps and the trim rings, and it really looks sweet.
Yeah.
These are probably my favorite Ford rally wheel ever, and the fact that they made it into this car.
Yeah.
The pictures of the car when it was restored, they belong on it.
Yeah, and it's funny because the pictures that I have of it after the crash, the tires that were on it are the same tires that were on it when we bought this place, here, 40 years later. And they were bias ply, of course, and you could stick your fingers through the cracks of them. They were cracked so bad from just sitting here. And so when I wanted to get the thing on rollers, I just could never see this car, even in the state it was in, without having the raised white letters on it. So I found these bias plies on Marketplace and put them on it.
Right.
Just for something, it deserves to have that look.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started working in that body shop in 1977.
76. Yeah.
76.
6, yeah.
And then you worked there till
78 when they closed.
and so this is why we wanted to tell you the backstory, because that was your apprenticeship basically with doing body work.
Yeah,
right?
he taught me everything I know about auto body. I never stopped doing auto body work. I've always tinkered with it. I had some dry spells, but I mean, it's something I've always enjoyed. Never considered myself much of a mechanic, but when you have a farm and things of that nature, you kind of get forced into those things so that you can make things work, but that doesn't actually make you a mechanic. I was wanting to make sure that it's going to be started right so that I don't mess anything up, and Mike's the man. And after the anomaly on the Fiesta, we just couldn't pass up the chance to do another first start with the Ranchero.
Right. So the skills that you learned from 76 to 78, this car was sitting in the shop being worked on while you were there at that time.
Yes.
And here you are. What's the total time span?
87, 97, 2007, 2017, 45 years later.
45 years later, he's still using those skills on the car that was in the shop when he started working.
I a lot of Butch's tools were here when I bought the place, and when I first started the body work on it, everything we did was old-timey. I still braised rod for any rot spots. I longboard stuff, and what was left of his old longboard was here, and I actually had it sitting on the dash while I was working, just kind of in memory of him, like he's still with me. Those, even though I only worked 3 years in that body shop, they were really fun years. It was probably the most fun job I ever had, and it was hard work, but we had a ball in that shop. And I can't believe how much I learned from the time I was 16 through 18, just doing this kind of stuff. So it's kind of neat that I'm able to do this. It kind of has, it brings back memories. I was telling somebody I had the radio going, I'm listening to music that classic rock, that we used to listen to back then, and I'm doing the skill I learned back then from the guy that taught me that back then, and it does have a lot of nostalgia to me in it. I really want to see this thing on the road again and kind of fulfill his dream, and now it's kind of like my dream, so. Even though sometimes it's more like a nightmare.
As they all turn out to be. So what we're going to do is, so that's a really cool story, and that's why, as much as this might bore some of you and you want to say, get to the start.
Yeah.
The backstory, I think, is what makes all the videos and the YouTube channels that we watch frequently is usually the story behind the story, right?
Yeah.
And then, and of course, it's always entertaining to watch whatever transpires during the video. But what we're going to do is we're going to end this here. We'll do a quick walk around of what we have to work with, and then we'll get to work on the first fire.
I will say, when we first came here, the Ranchero was almost unrecognizable. If you picture, the front fenders, grill, bumper, everything was off of it. It had stuff stacked halfway to the ceiling. A truck cap,
Tires were on top of it.
tarps,
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff. And,
And you couldn't get anywhere near it because the stuff started here and came all the way out,
yeah.
and then it started again in the next bay.
Yeah.
So just to see this vehicle in that corner of the garage was a major accomplishment all by itself.
Yeah, and the fact that Butch held on to it all those years, and he had some serious health issues, which I know was one of the reasons, and life happens too. And, so I don't have any fault of, geez, why didn't he ever finish it? It's understandable, but I'm glad to be able to pick up the baton and take it, on the next lap, so.
All right, let's do a quick walk around and then we can get to work.
All right.
All right, so like Steve said, from the firewall forward, the radiator support was on it, but nothing else except for the hood. So once he unburied everything, there was even stuff stacked in the engine compartment. But this is pretty much exactly how it was found. The rag on the carburetor, everything. So there's the MSD box in the back. The only thing we kind of really done engine-wise is we did notice that it had green antifreeze in it.
Yes.
So that means the block's not split,
Right.
It didn't have water in it, that kind of thing. So, so you did a tremendous amount of assembly on this car, and you've been basically running all the way around it, addressing the different body work issues, correct?
Yes.
So you can come out here.
The fenders, the biggest thing that he loved about this car was it had no rot on it. And unfortunately from sitting, it did get some, but all the fenders that he picked up for it, the hood, they were really rust free. They might have had some dings and whatnot in them. But you could tell I've got another one hanging on the wall up there. It has a little bit of rot in the bottom. And he opted to find one that was better, just to try to keep this car rot free. all the red primer that's on this car was primer that he had put on it. Anything gray, that's what I've done. I've gone over the body on it. It got a dent in this quarter just from setting, something ran into it. It's got a little rot down there, I've got a patch to braze in. The floors on these Rancheros, it spent some time outside at one point in its life, enough to accumulate some water in the bed. And someone drilled a hole in the front of it to let the water out, not realizing, I'm assuming, that meant all the water went right into the cab. Because there's a compartment that goes back to here. The spare tire goes behind the seat, and on the other side is an open compartment that goes all the way back under the bed, back to here. I often said between that, the vents that you can take off and store stuff in the rear quarters, and the compartment in the bed, it's just amazing how much stuff you could transport in this thing without anyone knowing. Not that that would ever happen.
Right, right. So I'll take a look at the bed, because where that water accumulated is kind of where the worst damage happened as a result of it sitting, correct?
Correct. And it's
So this is what he was talking about. The car, the way it was sitting, the water ran to the bulkhead and got trapped there.
right. And the spare tire sits underneath here through the inside of the cab. It's open. The spare tire fits here. The back, the floor on this side underneath is in perfect shape. On that side, it was really cheesy. So I had to braze that underneath. And the back of the floor on both sides behind the seat needed some patching. So, and I got that done. And we were able to get the seats back in it. This,
Yeah, this is the green color we were telling you we'd show you. So that's the original,
yep.
what was it?
Anti-established mint green. I think it's a metallic green. I've seen it listed as a couple of different names, but I always thought that one was the most unforgettable. Every company had their own name.
Right.
I never saw the Ranchero that color. It was maroon when I saw it.
Right. Cool. So you've been working your way around. Like you said, everything that's in primer is places that he's addressed. And I know you said something about you had to play with the door gap up here in the front.
Yeah, all the gaps on it, you know, there was no shims or anything on this thing. And we had some close, and I opened it up a little bit here. In '71, it's a lot different than cars today. They came out of the factory, gaps were uneven on them. It's very rare that you'd see anything that had an even gap on it.
Right. So even though this car took a tremendous hit, basically from here forward has been replaced, including the whole firewall and dash.
Yeah.
And he's got the interior. He had to take the carpets out because they had just spoiled. But mostly everything in here has been addressed now, right? As far as
Yep, it has. This dash, of course, is the Fairlane dash. And this must have been the color of the Fairlane. The dash was cracked. I've done some repair on the vinyl and whatnot, but this is all that's left to be painted on that. If I can come up for the color. Any
Yeah, right.
suggestions?
yeah,
Let us
he's
know.
looking for a suggested color of this. All right, so just close the door one real quick. So the car took a tremendous hit. It's all been put back together. And, you know, usually the telltale is, you know, is the door seam correct? And you'd have to say that they did a great job putting the hinge plate back where it belongs.
Yeah.
And the door gap here is nearly perfect. And I can't get a super good side shot of it because there's a column here in the shop. So anyway, we're going to get to work on the first fire. And we're going to pull the plugs, put some lubricant in the cylinders before we even try to even put a bar on it to turn it over. And once all that's done, I think it would be a wise idea to change the oil, just because the temperature changes in this garage all the time and the condensation occurs. So just to know that what's in there is good fresh stuff and the oil filter's not clogged, we'll probably do that. And if everything goes well in terms
Yeah.
of pulling the plugs, squirting some oil in the cylinders, we're going to pour a little down the carburetor. If the thing does a complete revolution with a bar on the crankshaft, then we'll try a starter, and then we'll try to get spark and then some fuel to it, and we'll see what happens after that.
That sounds good. I get a little nervous about that term, pulling the plug, though. You know, I don't know.
All right, well, right now it's still on life support, so we'll keep going. All right, folks, that's it for this time. Remember, if you can't be good, be spectacular.